Spotlight is a production of CTNY, the Catholic Television Network of Youngstown. It seeks to spotlight people, places, and events from around the Diocese of Youngstown that promote the new gospel of joy called for by Pope Francis. Your program host is Fr James Corda.
Hello and welcome to Spotlight. I'm Fr Jim Corda. Today we're going to talk about ecumenism. And to join me in that discussion is Fr Joe Witmer. Fr Joe, it's a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Thank you, Father Corda. Good to be here.
We know that you have a long history in ecumenism and ecumenical efforts. And so you really have a wealth of knowledge that you provide for us. And we look forward to hearing that and you sharing that with us today. One of the areas of ecumenism that we oftentimes don't talk about is our relationship with the Orthodox community or the Orthodox Church. And that really goes back a long ways. So tell us a little bit about the history of what many historians would call the schism between the East and the West.
Well, first of all, there's another group of Orthodox churches that split from the rest of Christianity following the Council of Chalcedon, whether there's one or two natures in Jesus. These are called the Oriental Orthodox. So there'd be the Armenians, the Copts, Ethiopians, Eritreans, Armenians, and the Syrian Orthodox, Jacobites, and the Syrian Orthodox of India. However, most of what we talk about happened in 1054, 1254, whatever. And this was the split between what we call the Byzantine Orthodox or Eastern Orthodox. And this happened at a time when, most Romans didn't speak Greek and most Greeks didn't speak Latin or Italian. So a lot of moving away from each other, not necessarily out of antagonism or anger, but just simply being unfamiliar with one another. Mm-hmm. So those things happened, and it made for a great deal of acrimony at times, especially in countries where one of these religions was the official religion of the country. So that made a problem.
Yeah. What's interesting is that this whole sense of language continued for the church in the East. You know, their liturgies would have been in Greek, while the West would have been in Latin. And of course, those had continued for centuries. I'm interested in knowing in the Orthodox community, do they do Mass or do they do their services in the vernacular, or do many of them still use the Greek language?
Well, it's not always just Greek. Probably another common one is Slavonic, Church Slavonic. So that you had Cyril and Methodius went north and evangelized Eastern Europe and Russia. And so those traditions also started out. And of course, many things happened along the way, so that there are points at which the Orthodox need to talk with one another, as well as with Catholics, if there's going to be any sort of vital unity among those churches.
What were some of the things that led to the unfortunate split between the East and the West? And let's try then briefly then to bring that to today and what's going on now in trying to build better relations between the East and the West.
I expect in those days as well as today, some things are big news and other things are local relationships, which says to me both that's probably true then, and also the healing of relationships is going to come about when there are closer personal relationships on the local scene and in different places. We can imagine parts of the United States where there are very few Orthodox. The former Father Isaiah Chronopoulos, who was at St. John the Forerunner back in the late 60s, I believe, he is now the metropolitan, the bishop of 12 states. And I ran into him some time ago, and he was saying they have 3 congregations in all of Wyoming. So it's hard for people to know each other.
Sure.
And so they could gather for a pan-Orthodox synod, but that won't solve everything until these other dynamics take place.
And we know that Pope Emeritus Benedict had some relations and did some dialogue with the Eastern Church, as well as Pope Francis. Tell us briefly about some of that and what transpired and where is it at now?
Well, certainly, we know that the term the filioque was more or less very important to some. In other words, the Nicene Creed, as articulated at the Council of Nicaea, did not use the term that the Holy Spirit proceeded from the Father and the Son, filioque. That was something that the West introduced about 4 centuries later, but we put it in the Creed. The Creed we recite during our liturgy, so it takes on a special importance for us. However, since we got along 800 years without it, it may not be that necessary to put in the liturgy. Not that we do not deny that in our way of looking at theology it is appropriate. However, what shall we do? If we keep insisting, it seems to take on more of an importance than it deserves. So people talk about that.
Yeah. When we talk about the schism that happened back at the turn of the first millennium, have these relations been getting better for Catholic Orthodox dialogue, or has there been a stalemate, or what can we expect in the future?
Well, I think things are moving ahead, certainly more in the last century or two. Part of that has to do with the relationship between Orthodox and other Christians, not just Catholics. Orthodox were members and are members of the World Council of Churches and the National Council of Churches. We haven't seen our way to go there yet. We're around the edges and official observers, but we haven't taken that effort, that step, to become part of that organization which is of interest to consider what witness the churches might do together.
Well, we're going to talk more about ecumenism in a moment, but we want to take a quick break. So please stay with us. We'll be right back.
I am Marino.
Yo soy Marino.
Marino, an American Catholic organization of priests and brothers, has been reaching out to those in need for nearly 100 years in 26 countries throughout the world. Missioners, workers, volunteers, supporters, we are all Marino.
I'm Father Mike, and I am Marino.
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 My name is Sister Mary Claudina, and I run a home for abandoned children. I want to take care of children who have no parents, because luckily I come from a very loving family. There are 8 of us. And I remember when one of my cousins got sick, and she called my mom and said, "Mom, the doctor has said that I might not have too long to live. Will you please raise my 3 children for me?" I remember we had a meeting at home, and my dad called a meeting, and my mom was explaining to all of us. And my father said, this powerful word, he said, "We already have 8. What is 3 more?" We learn to care for each other, to love each other, to fight among each other, to make up, to forgive, to just to be a family. And I think that's what I learned from home, and I wanted to share that with children who do not have that love and that opportunity just to know what a family is all about.
Welcome back to our show. I'm talking with Fr Joe Witmer about ecumenism. One of the areas that I believe we've had a lot of dialogue in, at least here locally, and I think in the country, is our dialogue with our Lutheran brothers and sisters. And that Catholic Lutheran dialogue has been going on for some time. What have been the fruits of that, and also in light of the anticipated 500th anniversary of the Protestant Reformation, which will be commemorated in 2017. So let's talk about that.
Certainly. Right at the end of the Second Vatican Council, an ecumenical office opened in the United States at the then called the National Conference of Catholic Bishops, and as well as in the Vatican. And already in 1965, a dialogue between Lutherans and Roman Catholics was initiated. They've been meeting regularly ever since, producing many documents, and it's been a very rich affair, both in terms of, well, like a lot of seminary professors on each side are the members of the dialogue. Mm-hmm. So, shall we say, the discussions that they have, they can take back to their seminaries, and hopefully this can make a difference.
I know when I was in the seminary, and perhaps when you were in the seminary, those were some things that we really never talked about or never were schooled about. They may have briefly mentioned ecumenism when we studied the Vatican II documents, which were rather fresh for me at the time, but that was not something that we engaged in. But I remember shortly after I was ordained, that was something that our local ordinary at the time felt very strongly about, and I think coming from Vatican II and his presence there, felt very strongly about the need for dialogue with our Christian brothers and sisters. And of course, that dialogue with Lutherans was almost kind of a natural. Martin Luther was a Catholic priest. Many of the ways that they celebrate liturgy is almost identical to ours in the Roman Church. Many of their beliefs are very similar. And so I think the dialogue has really built on what unites us as in contrast to what divides us. And how important in this dialogue, especially with the Lutheran and Catholic, is it important to build on what unites us?
Absolutely essential. We can always find things with which to disagree among ourselves, whether it's friends down the block, kids 10 years old, or whatever. But if one wants to create something new, then one has to look at what do we share. Martin Luther was an Augustinian friar, monk. Pope Benedict studied Augustinian theology, and that's been very helpful. The former Joseph Ratzinger did come to the aid of the Lutheran Catholic dialogue as they put together the joint declaration on the doctrine of justification. He was there and very helpful. And that's something that locally here, 1 year later, that was 1999, in 2000, Bishop Marcus Miller, the then local Lutheran bishop, approached Bishop Tobin and said, let's do something together to celebrate this joint declaration. And Bishop Tobin said, I think that's a fine idea, but I think we ought to do more. I think we ought to enter into a covenant with one another and commit ourselves to prayer, study, and action. Well, those of us familiar with the Christian family movement and that says, oh, that sounds familiar. But certainly it does make a well-rounded relationship if one talks about prayer, study, and action. So that covenant did become, shall we say, sealed and celebrated at the end of October in the year 2000 in the Cathedral of Youngstown. Since then, Northwest Ohio Synod and the Diocese of Toledo have entered into a covenant. The covenant in north central Ohio not only was Lutherans and the Diocese of Cleveland, but also the Diocese of Ohio and the Episcopal Church, which is the northern half of the state. So all of this has created something new. And we've had celebrations, we've had some ecumenical discussions in parishes that were open to us, where there was an invitation, and we helped make things happen.
And we know that each year, at least here locally, they do celebrate and commemorate that covenant between the Lutherans and the Catholic community. We know that in 2017, they commemorate the 500th anniversary, and we know that the Holy Father will be present in some way during that commemoration. What would be some of those things that we can look forward to or get to know in preparation for that celebration?
Funny you should mention that. Yes, on October 23rd this year, 2016, there will be a celebration, in a sense, beginning the countdown year. It will take place in Canton at Zion Lutheran Church. Bishop Allende and Bishop Murray will both be there. And we'll have some prayer and some study, and hopefully lead to some action. I was reading just recently that on October 31st, which is Reformation Day of this year, 2016, Pope Francis is going to Lund, Sweden, to join with some leaders of the Lutheran World Federation as they begin the final year towards the 500th anniversary. So this is pretty exciting.
We've got about 1 minute left before we take another break. They're using that word commemoration instead of celebration. What's the difference?
Well, I could imagine that there would be some who would see, let's celebrate the division. And I don't know if that's what we want to do. The Lutherans themselves, at no instigation that I know of from the Catholics, have said we don't want to get into that. Let's call it a commemoration. It certainly was an important time in the history of many nations, many churches, many individuals, but this isn't a time for celebrating division, but reunion.
Well said. We're going to take a quick break. Please stay with us. We'll be back in a moment.
I spent 34 years as a teacher. For the first 10 minutes of teaching, I was terrified, and then I fell in love with it.
I am so grateful that teaching was my ministry. It was such a gift.
Many sisters, brothers, and religious order priests served for little pay.
One year, I had a classroom of 68 children.
I was chaplain for the ice hockey team and loved it, even the 6:30 a.m. practices.
Today, hundreds of religious communities lack retirement funds.
I loved helping the kids stage musicals.
Gifts to the Retirement Fund for Religious help provide for medications, nursing care, and more.
Back then, we didn't earn much, but seeing a child learn was really priceless.
Please give to those who have given a lifetime. Donate at your local parish.
Thank you, and God bless you.
There is a place where a total stranger will give you their blood. There is a place where someone you never knew will save your child from drowning. A place where people from 7 states away will turn up at your door and give you food and shelter after a flood. There's a place where a person who doesn't look like you, talk like you, or dress like you will stretch out their hand and put it across your shoulders and say, everything is going to be okay. That place is called America, where we look out for each other, and it's up to us to keep it that way. When you help the American Red Cross, you help America.
Welcome back to our show. I'm talking with Fr Joe Witmer about ecumenism. The last couple segments we talked about what's kind of going on nationally and globally. Let's try to localize it and share with the folks that are with us what's happening here locally.
Very good. Catholics have been very much a part of the Mahoning Valley Association of Churches. The last two presidents were Catholics. Currently, the secretary and the treasurer are both Catholics. So we certainly are involved in this body. What's exciting is this body and its predecessors are celebrating its 100th anniversary. It started as a sort of an outgrowth of a Billy Sunday, I don't guess we call it a retreat, but an evangelical event down on Federal Street. And then in 1916, they started this cooperative organization. Obviously, Catholics weren't part of it then, but things have grown over the years, and that's a good expression of that. We've been blessed to have the Ohio Cultural Alliance, which is here in Youngstown, sort of help us celebrate this 100th anniversary. And a number of different programs. They meet the second Monday of the month and have taken the highlights of different churches and other religions in our community. So the first was Hinduism, the second was Judaism. We were at Temple El Emeth, and its pastor and Father George Velasco, well known for his work with Jewish-Catholic relations, were responders and presenters at that event. And then there will be, later on in the series, an event in which Islam is presented. So it's an interesting and exciting kind of thing. About 225 people come to each of these events.
That's wonderful. What is, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, what is the state of the union of ecumenical dialogue in our country? We know that it's important for us as Roman Catholics to dialogue with people of faith. How has it been going around the country in this ecumenical spirit or interfaith spirit of dialogue? Has it been happening? Has it been working? And what have been some of the fruits of the labor of those people?
Well, I would say, again, it varies from place to place, depending on personalities, dynamics, the religious flavor and history of each state or each local area. Each one has its own history, which makes it exciting or challenging. Ours has been a little bit of both, trying to do that. But as you mentioned, we've had good leadership from our bishops, and that has certainly helped Catholics feel good about this relationship, not only with other Christians, but with other religious groups. Of course, we were all excited back in those days when Bishop Malone was invited to give the sermon at the funeral service of the prominent rabbi in Youngstown.
Yes, of happy memory. And how important is it for us to continue that dialogue and that discussion with people of faith?
Well, I hear that in so many of the things that Pope Francis is saying and writing, that we may not always agree on things, but we can at least dialogue. We can try and discover one another, again, where we agree, where we might understand why things came to be in the other person's life or group along the way, and they might understand ours also.
And I think if there's a word that I could use to kind of describe the tenor of dialogue is respect. how important it is for us to have respect for people of other faith traditions, whether it's our Jewish brothers and sisters, our friends in the Islamic community, the Orthodox Church, and our Christian brothers and sisters that are Protestant, how important that respect is, because without that, dialogue and relationships and discussion really never happens.
True. So many things can happen. Let's say organized things can lead individuals to have a conversation with somebody they hadn't yet had a conversation with. If that gives them motivation, it may spread.
In the last couple minutes of our show, what would you like to share with the folks that are with us about the importance of ecumenism and dialogue, and what would you encourage them to do, especially as we find ourselves celebrating and commemorating significant milestones, whether it's with the locally Mahoning Valley Association of Churches or the 500th anniversary in 2017 of the Protestant Reformation? What can they do to participate and also to help commemorate?
Well, certainly participation is the big thing. In the city of Youngstown, one has the organization known as Action. I think it's Association of Churches to Improve Our Neighborhoods. Get involved. And if one finds out that they have a talent that can be used by Action, things will happen better for the city and for the churches. Of course, adding information is always good. The website of the U.S. Bishops is usccb.org, I guess.
Correct.
And go to Teaching and Beliefs, and there's Ecumenism, and that just open up all kinds of documents, history. Sometimes documents can be downloaded.
Well, we know that in our rather complex and complexing and busy world, that it would be good for us to take the time, especially as Christians, to do that, and to go to those websites on the internet to find out more information, to see how you could dialogue and commemorate and celebrate with those of other faiths, and to be participatory in those significant events. We certainly thank you, Father Joe Witmer, for being on Spotlight today. We thank you for the long work that you've done in ecumenism. We know that it goes back decades, and we thank you for that. And we appreciate the information that you share with us today.
Thank you.
And thank you for being with us. Have a good day, and God be with you.
Spotlight has been a production of CTNY, the Catholic Television Network of Youngstown. Your program host was Father James Corda.